Hello, everybody. This is tremendously exciting, and thank you for coming out tonight. And it's my privilege to be able to, as a representative of the University of Melbourne, acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded land on which we are here tonight, and also many of us work, learn, and live. The Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung and Bunurong peoples of Burnley, Fisherman's Bend, Parkville, and South Bank and Werribee campuses, the Yorta Yorta Nation at our Dookie and Shepparton campuses, the Dija Dija Wurrung people at our Creswick campus. And I'm going to acknowledge, and the university acknowledges, how grateful we are to the traditional owners, elders, knowledge holders of all Indigenous nations and clans who have been instrumental in our reconciliation journey. And we acknowledge the unique place that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples, as the original owners and custodians of the lands and waterways across the Australian continent, with their histories of continuous connection dating back more than 60,000 years, bring to us as a university. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and the future, acknowledge the importance of Indigenous knowledge in the Academy as a profession of teachers, researchers, artists, creators, staff and students. And we're privileged to work and learn with Indigenous colleagues every day. I'm also delighted here today as Director of the Centre for AI and Digital Ethics, which is called CAIDE to those in the know, and to begin this book launch, because we've played a small part in supporting this innovative and disruptive publication and collective collaboration. CAIDE was started in 2020. It was started by me, a lawyer, and Tim Miller, a computer scientist. And at that time, the university asked us, what do you want from CAIDE? We wanted to bring together people across the university to think about issues of AI and digital ethics. And actually in 2020, people were still asking us, is that really relevant? I think we proved them right. But we wanted to work with people from the humanities, medicine, education. But most of all, both Tim and I wanted to work with philosophers and artists and curators. We're getting there. We have Simon Coghlan, who's a co-director as a philosopher, Sam Barron for philosophy is on our advisory board, and so Solange Granger from the Faculty of Fine Arts. But most exciting of all, we have CAIDE. And CAIDE is the origin of this project, and it's an aspiration to take seriously the expertise of artists, creators, literary scholars in the discipline that is AI ethics. We wanted to recognise their role in producing aesthetic encounters and emotional engagements that support ethical feeling and deliberation about humans and AI. That's much more than a sort of tick a box or one-stop shop response. And we also recognised that artists and creators need to be paid for this work. They're not doing it for free, and it's not a mere add-on to the big picture of what do we do with AI. CAIDE's been with us from the outset, and Tyne, who can't be here tonight because she's home with her baby, and Vanessa took place in our first early career researcher summer school. And they took seriously our challenge for cross-disciplinary work. And I'd have to say they've constantly prompted us to do more, think harder, be better. They told us that this could go beyond a mere conversation and moved it in transdisciplinary space and even a collectivist space. We met Crystal, Jasmine, Willow, Monica and Gabby, and together they have continued to challenge us to think about ethics AI in a way that's reflective and explorative. They've found a face and their place for the uncomfortable aspect of this explorations, and they've made us comfortable with the ambiguous. They have decentered AI ethics, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to this launch. Bring it away.
Thank you. We'll pass over to Amelia now, who is zooming in from Norway.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Amelia, as you just heard, and I'm one of the editors of this book and also part of the CAIDE collective. So Decentring Ethics, AI art as method, brings together artists, practitioners, and researchers to explore situated and practice-based approaches to ethically navigate our AI-saturated world. And we take a very distinctive approach to AI art by viewing artificial intelligence not just as a creative tool, but actually as an emergent cultural and material force. And contrary to some of the public discourse that we have today, our definition of AI art is not interchangeable with any output made by an image generator like DALL-E or Midjourney, but it refers to the complex socio-technical assemblages involved in computational processes. And our book also challenges the dominant approaches to AI ethics, which focus primarily on things like regulation and compliance. And we wanted the book to be a reaction to these ethical frameworks that also emphasize transparency and privacy and legal requirements. So we recognize that these are really important, but they also assume that complete knowability is both possible and desirable. While we propose moving beyond this very human-centered Western regulatory approach toward what we call a more than human ethics. So rather than asking what is our human project for the digital age, we wanted to ask what is our more than human project for the computational age. And to talk more about this, I'll now pass on to Jasmine.
Hi everyone, I am Jasmine Pfefferkorn. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow here at the School of Culture and Communication. I'm also a member of CAIDE, and along with Amelia, we direct a research group called Coded Aesthetics. So as Amelia pointed out, we really wanted to intervene in this space of ethics, and we did so with this concept of decentering in two ways. The first, we really wanted to account for non-Western ethical frameworks. A lot of the conversation that we have around the space of AI ethics comes from a Western judicial system. That's fine, but there's a lot more in that space that accounts for pluriversalist perspectives, and that's really the direction that we wanted to go in. We recognise that a more nuanced ethics is approached via this multiplicity of perspectives. The other kind of intervention that we made through decentering ethics was recognising that ethical agents extend to the non-human. This is like organic, like flora, fauna, but also non-organic, so the technologies that we interact with. So a decentered ethics is really aiming to imagine a more than human ethics by extending, by building upon the existing human perspective. And then, as Amelia had already pointed to, this idea of AI art as method was really a way of intervening in this space where a lot of AI art in the mainstream is conflated with AI image generation. And so we really wanted to promote this idea that AI art is a way that artists work with and in response to computational technologies. The word method is a contentious one in this space. We very much recognise that because method is often seen as repeatable, as instrumentalising, and this is something that artists often rally against. And so we invite you to think of AI art as method in the way that we're putting it forward, as a way of thinking through ethics as emerging through intuitive practices rather than top-down regulations, as artists navigating their lived knowledge experience as it comes into contact with institutions and other societal bodies. And as I said, working with or in response to AI in ways that are embodied and relational, prioritising a practice-based knowledge. And with that little teaser and taster, I'll pass it over to Vanessa.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Vanessa Bartlett. I am an independent curator and my practice explores what happens when lived experience intersects with medical and technical systems. I was formerly a Mackenzie postdoctoral fellow at University of Melbourne in the Faculty of Arts, then moving to the Faculty of Law through CAIDE for a research fellowship. And I think one of the things that's been really generative about this project for me was beginning a research fellowship and kind of wondering how to put forward the value of arts practice within a fairly sort of traditional disciplinary university context. And I just want to kind of acknowledge Jeannie again and CAIDE for their, I guess, sense of vision around supporting what the arts can bring to this space, and also just acknowledge them for giving us a fair amount of free rein to make this project what it is without seeking to instrumentalize our practice as well. I do want to name, again, as Jasmine has said, that method is a contentious term in this context, and lots of artists would eschew the idea of like art as method because it's not repeatable. I guess one of the things that's come out through the book time and time again is this idea of the productive tension. So not seeking to provide the answers to research questions, but to provoke further questions and to work with that multiplicity. And arts practice is iterative and it's responsive to the situation at hand. And that, I think, is inherent to the value that artists bring to this investigation of AI ethics. I also just want to say very briefly as well that we don't necessarily expect that all artists have to be ethical at all times. But one of the interesting patterns that repeats across the book is really how artists often need to become or need to consider ethics at the point where they intersect with cultural institutions. Now, we've just been talking about how much we love cultural institutions, universities and GLAM sector, but they can also be problematic as well. And they can have much more restrictive regulatory frameworks than artists would necessarily subscribe to as independent practitioners. So I think, again, that's one of the interesting kind of productive tensions within this book around ethics, is where does artistic practice as method meet the real world and the regulatory frameworks that exist within it? So I've been tasked with very briefly mentioning some of the chapters within the book, and I kind of rather rudely decided just to go with mentioning a few examples of artistic practice, because that's what we're really here for. So a couple of examples, Xanthi Dobby's chapter on queer remix art, you'll hear from them shortly. But this chapter documents that tension around censorship and remix practices where the artist's ethics are slightly different from the cultural institution that they're working with. We have forms of slow practice that are documented in two of the chapters. Arathi Akrapeti crafts her own unique data set for working with a GAN in the production of an artwork. So this is a slow practice of care as artistic method. We have Dani Admis, who enacts portholing as a method in curatorial practice. So her chapter talks about how we can behave in more ethical ways when these little portholes in our practices open up. So often it's very challenging to navigate the world that we live in, and particularly the cultural institutions that we intersect with. But we may find portholes, little moments of wayfinding where we can enact a better ethics in practice. Finally, I just want to mention the final chapter of the book, which is a collective statement, which is written by the wider CAIDE team, including Gabby and Tyne, who were mentioned earlier. We tried to document or make a statement of how we enacted ethics in our practice, given that we're precarious workers, sometimes working in quite difficult situations. And this was, or not difficult situations, but compromised institutional situations. And this was really a response to what we were observing around practices of care washing and ethics washing in certain institutional practices. And yeah, that collective statement talks about emotional and social labor. It talks about multiplicity, and it talks about collectivism rather than interdisciplinarity, which is what we have tried to enact in our work. So that's enough from me. I'm now going to introduce some of the artist speakers who have written glorious chapters for the book. So we will be hearing from Helen Knowles, Nora Al-Badri, and Xanthi Dobby. First up, we're going to Helen. Yeah, okay, so Helen Knowles is an artist and curator of the Birthrights collection, the first and only collection of contemporary artwork dedicated to childbirth. Knowles is currently undertaking a practice-based PhD project called More Than Human Healthcare at the University of Northumbria. And I held a conversation with Helen about her practice, which was an absolute pleasure. Helen, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Vanessa. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, can you see that? Oh, no. Can you see that?
We can see your screen, but it's not on presenter mode yet.
Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So, yeah,
Just
my
wait
name's
one
Helen.
moment, sorry, Helen. We're just waiting for it to go up on the big screen as well. It's just taking one extra. There we go. We're ready for you now. Thanks, Helen.
Brilliant. Okay, so my name's Helen Knowles. I'm an artist and also a curator. And as Vanessa said, I've actually just completed a PhD, which is called More Than Human Healthcare. And basically, it was looking at our relationships with non or more than humans across 3 different spaces. And today I'm going to talk about one of those films, which is Trust the Medicine. The 3 spaces I worked in were the AI lab at King's College, where they were developing facets of the AI doctor. So obviously, we would be developing a relationship with a non-human. I worked in Colombia, where in a particular area of Colombia where they drink yahe, which is ayahuasca, and they have a relationship with the non-human entities of the forest. And I also worked, and this is the film that I'm going to talk about, or installation, on the psychedelic trials at King's College London. And basically, when people take psychedelics, they sometimes meet entities. And sometimes they form relationships with these entities. And I was very interested in this. So, oh, I can't seem to move my, hang on, there. Okay, so you can see here, this is, it's the box that they carry the Schedule A drugs in for the trials. When I was there, they were trialing 5-MeO-DMT. Obviously, these are synthesized chemicals. They're not like the sort of yahe that you can find in the rainforest or mushrooms. They're a sort of synthesized chemical compound. And I worked quite closely with some of the researchers. And here you can see I was working with AI researchers and psychedelic researchers to make films like on their phones. And it was really interesting during this kind of discussion because the phrase trust the medicine came up. And basically, one of the researchers was sort of noting how contradictory it was because when they give these medicines, which, you know, are like pills, they also have something called psychedelic therapy, which is where a psychotherapist sits alongside the person whilst they're taking the drugs. And sometimes it was noted that they would use this phrase, trust the medicine, which kind of implied that the medicine had some kind of autonomy, which I found very interesting because in sort of traditional, you know, psychotherapy or neuroscience, really they just say that, you know, when you meet an entity, it's simply a projection of your own subconscious. So that kind of brought me to this question: what can science and knowledge production look like? Or what can it look like if we begin with the premise that other than humans can know, act, and produce their own worlds? And can we trust these caring non-human entities and work with them? So I'm just very, very quickly going to read this out. This is an anonymized diary of me attending a psychedelic integration group. Now, basically, after people had taken the medicines, they would come together for these groups, which is where people sat with a psychotherapist and talked about their experiences. So I had to run down past King's College Hospital in really useless shoes to get there on time, and I still arrived 20 minutes late. And as I entered the room, sweating and huffing and puffing, the facilitator and lead psychotherapist calmly handed me a glass of water and told me to collect myself. This was the first time that we'd met together in person since I'd been attending the integration groups on Zoom. In the centre of the circle was an orchid growing inside the large grey glass vitrine, which swirled with a dreadlock of roots. Normally, I would sit back and listen to other people during the sessions, but I had entered the room as people were introducing each other, and it felt disingenuous not to explain that I was carrying out research. And as soon as I mentioned entities, people in the room became interested. I also decided to mention how confused I was about the phrase trust the medicine, how it implied the medicine acted as an autonomous being, but the scientific paradigm seemed to repel and fence off this conjecture because it considered these entities as figments of our imagination or a projection of our subconscious. Spoken softly to participants during the trials, it was meant to reassure them, and these perspectives seemed contradictory. The therapist nodded and acknowledged that the paradox that conservative psychotherapy or neuroscience tended towards. It was interesting because the talk of entities led to a more philosophical conversation. They, however, kept bringing it back to the idea of healing, asking, what kind of conversation is healing? Perhaps they meant speculative research wasn't healing. So after attending these therapy groups for about 10 months, I decided, because reenactment is kind of part of my practice, to stage a psychedelic integration group. But this time it would be focused specifically on entity encounter. So basically, I was invited to do an exhibition, which was to do with William Blake. And the exhibition took place on the street that William Blake, who is obviously an artist from the 19th century, basically carried out seances and drew entities. Okay, so there was a hotel on the corner of this street, very flashy. And basically, I decided to stage it in this hotel, which was kind of like obviously very kind of corporate. And I thought that was very interesting. And I invited, I put a call out, and I had about 50 people apply. And as you can see here, that the image that you saw there was like the long 360 camera when it's kind of been stretched out. But actually this thing in the middle is a camera. It's a 360 camera. And I decided that I wanted to shoot this piece so that I could get both sides of the circle. And, just this idea of having this strange entity kind of surveying the situation. And here you can see Alan Wildsmith, who was one of the psychotherapists, and the other one was Raquel Scheid. So following this psychedelic integration group, which was actually really, really incredible, we had 3 women talk about their experiences of like ketamine therapy, talk about their experience of taking DMT. And this woman who's on the left actually took DMT because she was told that she would lose her voice and she had to have an operation. And she met some entities which she believed gave her back her voice, and she became a musician. So basically, I brought the participants back together, and they came, some of them armed with drawings and others just with descriptions of their entities. And we used AI, generative AI, to make the entities. And so it was this idea of like a non-human making a non-human. And this was a drawing on the left, and then obviously feeding it in, and it kind of became this image on the right. And this was a tree that one of the participants met that she created using generative AI. And then I work with meta objects in Hong Kong, and also using lots of elements of AI. But here, this is sort of CGI to make these entities like basically come alive within a Unity search engine. So the installation is actually this is one screen. So it's actually 2 hours long. It's kind of like quite meditative, the whole piece. I wouldn't expect the audience to kind of spend 2 hours. And basically, this is the other side with the tree. So I focused on 2 entities, the tree entity and these cross-faced beings. And what the audience do is when they come into the space, they're given an iPad, and we kind of programmed ChatGPT to be like those entities. And so you can actually have a conversation with them. And then we use sentiment analysis to score the conversations. So we were looking at whether like it was, whether the conversations showed if they were trusting or if they were not trusting, if they were engaged. And basically, I found it really interesting because it was really reductive, but like sort of as an experiment, kind of fascinating. Anyway, so some of the conversations were like, how am I supposed to embrace Bruce when it's situated inside my own head? So the cosmic dance has left its mark within the very seat of your consciousness. But does this not serve as a gentle nudge, a reminder to turn your gaze inward and explore the realms of your own mind? And what I found really fascinating was that no matter what happened, these entities, these ChatGPT entities, always sounded like a kind of annoying therapist. Like there was just no way you were ever going to get anything different from this kind of sort of equanimous, like kind of way of thinking about the universe in these lovely tones. And so I just found that interesting because it made me think about the kinds of milieus that inform these technologies. And I suppose that's really important because what I'm thinking about is something called cosmotechnics, which is an idea from a philosopher called Yok Hui. And basically it's a call to challenge the hegemony of the capitalist milieu and fragment that. And so I suppose what I was trying to do in this situation was fragment it by bringing to the fore these non-humans. So here you can see the audience interacting. And basically what would happen is when the audience interacted, it would change the way that these entities moved around the screen. So I think we've got a video. I'm going to play it and hope that it works.
I got a really clear understanding that I needed to pay gratitude and respect to the beings of that land for creating beauty in existence and teaching me moments of love through many others psychedelic experiences that I've had in the past where it felt like I got glimpses of them, but never the full real life picture of them being there in real contact with me. And I've always said as well to my friends that when I would take mushrooms or LSD in the past, it felt like I was on a Zoom call with them. But when I went there, it felt like we met in person for the first time.
So, yeah, I suppose the thing is that sometimes these entities become menacing on the screen and sometimes they become kind of beautiful and kind of charming. And so, yeah, that's the project. Have I kept within 15 minutes? I'm not sure.
Yes, we've got people applauding for you now. Thank you so much, Helen. That was wonderful. Okay, so I'm thrilled to be introducing an artist whose work I've found hugely inspirational when thinking about how technology can be mobilized to practice a decentered ethics. Noura Al-Badri is an Iraqi-German artist who has long engaged with digital and computational technologies to make art that explores cultural heritage and pushes back against imperialism within cultural institutions. Her work has been widely exhibited, including at the V&A Applied Arts Pavilion at the Venice Biennale, at the Design Biennial in Istanbul, ZKM in Karlsruhe, Carver Institute in Berlin, Jeu de Paume in Paris, among many, many other places. She also works as a lecturer, and her art has a strong research base. Today, I have the great honour of screening Nora's work, The Post-Truth Museum, and I believe it might be the first public screening in Australia. Nora will have to correct me if I'm... No, it's the first public screening in Australia, and then that will be followed by a brief Q&A with Nora before she has to run off to her other commitments for the day. So without further ado, I will be playing you the Post-Truth Museum.
Multicolor world, and we can also glimpse into the future, shaping options and mitigating risks.
Nearly every conversation today about the restitution of cultural property to Africa already happened 40 years ago. Nearly every relevant film had already been made and nearly every demand had already been formulated.
Today, I want to apologize and reconcile with the activists who are denounced as populist and even being anti-Semitic for their colonial interventions. I want to apologize for saying that they were lacking the basic understanding of the complexity of provenance research and of being ignorant of the diversity of acquisition histories. We are seeing now what crimes are unfolding in Abu Dhabi and the Louvre. I was the defender of looters, I was the populist.
The methods by which the African continent and many others have been stolen have been contemptible and dishonest beyond expression. Lying treaties, rivers of rum, murder, assassination, mutilation, rape, and torture have marred the progress of Englishmen, German, Frenchmen, and Belgian on the dark continent. The only way in which the world has been able to endure the horrible tale is by deliberately stopping its ears and changing the subject of conversation while the deviltry went on. In Europe, it was also a struggle between foreign and interior policy, between diplomacy and museums, between information and disinformation.
I am not a ghost, but I come to you in your dreams. Now is the time of the voiceless of the world and their objects. It's the time when plunder starts speaking for itself. We healed. We restored. Our broken hearts and shards. Fight. We will take back our dead and their objects. Into our lands. Some masks are coming off. Death masks are put on. Other masks are reanimated. We are dancing again. We are truth-speaking again. As techno-heritage advances, the Imperial Museum becomes a tomb. Museum storages become caves. And we will circulate in an endless stream of collective memory. On your networks, chips and screens.
Thank you so much, Nora. That was amazing and such an honour to be able to show that. I do know that you have to go, but maybe we've got a few minutes for a couple of questions together. One of the things that I really love about your work is that it complicates some of the more obvious conversations that we have around the use of AI, where in mainstream we maybe think immediately deep fakes are bad and always bad, but here you've used deep fakes to put the words that we want to hear into the mouths of these museum directors. And I'm wondering, because of course this is something that that you kind of do across your work, this sort of disruptive ethical hacking of technologies. I'm wondering if you can speak a bit more to this idea of ethical hacking in your work.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, as you said, it's very ingrained in my practice and how I work, and maybe to have an example for this work, it comes through the material I work with, namely our cultural big data and what I like to call techno-heritage, that is our digitized artifacts and digitized collections. And I always try to reverse the exploitative mechanisms, and also try to, in my pieces, to address the complexities and mostly negative impacts of technology as well. So I only try to find a small spot of emancipatory potential of the technologies. And in this case, it was very obvious for me conceptually that what these museums are doing is they do an identity theft of entire cultures. And deepfakes are also an identity theft. And I tried to find what is actually the identity of the museum. And there is, of course, not just one person. But after many years of engagement with museums, I know that the directors are leading the way or the path, and also trying to contain and preserve and gatekeep what they have. And therefore, I actually chose the directors as the public face, and did the same thing that they do, basically, namely an identity theft of their images and their voices as well, which is something very private. And not just with this piece trying to criticize, which many people have done, including myself in the past years. And the discussion, the discourse about this topic, restitution, reparations, has shifted a little bit and changed a little bit, but really not not really fundamentally or significantly. So I was a bit tired of criticizing and wanted to use that deepfake technology as a way to sketch an utopia what museums could be, actually. Yeah.
And I will say that there is an accompanying text to the video work that I do have here today. So perhaps after this, or after the talks are finished, if you want to have a look at that text, I'll be leaving it up here on the stage, so you can flick through that as well. Nora, I know from the conversation that we've had that this work arose really as a kind of direct experience of coming into contact and kind of like negotiating that tension with the cultural institution. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about that backstory and the impetus for creating this work.
Yeah, like since many years, I work around this topic, and I was really tired, and I thought, no, everyone has said everything, like a quote from another scholar in this field, and now there needs to be more societal pressure. So, but then I was invited to the Humboldt Forum, which is also addressed directly in this piece through a text from one of the scholars who in the end, unfortunately, the video was cut off a little bit here in the presentation, but there are many quotes, mostly, I would say, from contemporary voices and scholars who deal with cultural heritage institutions, colonialism, post-colonial theory, or restitution directly. Yeah, but then I was invited to a workshop for the Humboldt Forum, only internal, because I don't go to these museums on the stage, basically, I don't want to whitewash anything or so. But then I was invited by a very highly esteemed colleague of mine, Maria Domar Castro de Alvarez, who is the German-speaking figure for post-colonial theory, basically. And she said, no, let's do it internally, because we still need to stay in touch and in dialogue to see what's going on. And that convinced me. But then it was more like a psychoanalytical session of a museum, really. 40 employees discussing their anxieties and their challenges and I think mostly anxieties and shame and all that things that also comes up in the video as well. And after this session, I was really shocked, kind of also on this state of mind that still exists in the museums. So, and what I heard from the employees, because the directorship was not present in this meeting, was also that the directorship is mainly trying to forbid and contain and so on, and a change, basically, fundamental change. And that's how the piece, how I was inspired to do this. And in Iraq, we have the saying, the fish stinks from its head. So, and actually they wanted to commission me a piece, which I denied because, as I said, I'm more really this institutional critique is, that's what I do. So you cannot really invite institutional critique, but I told them, if you want, you can buy my next piece, which wasn't ready by then, but I already knew some parts of it, and it was the Post-Truth Museum. So they bought it before it was done, and then I kind of set myself also the goal of making an impossible piece that they will not be able to exhibit. And if they were to exhibit it, where it's still like ethically for me okay that they would do so, to address the anxieties and of the people who work there, who will have to walk into the museum, seeing their director, speaking to them in a way he would never do in what reality, but he still does on the screen. Yeah, so this was the piece, but until now it was not exhibited, but they have it somewhere.
Thank you so much, Nora. Nora, I will let you leave. I'm sorry our conversation was so brief today, but I know that you've got a whole day ahead of you in Berlin of things to do. I love your work. I love how hopeful it is. And yeah, I could talk to you forever, but thank you so much for being here with us this evening and in your morning. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Hi again, everyone. Just a quick note to say that we're not taking questions as part of the formal presentations. That is what the networking portion of this evening's event is going to be for. So there's an invitation for you to download the book and to store up any questions that you might have for us for conversations over wine in a little while. I've been given the absolute pleasure of introducing our final speaker. I think I can say with confidence that Xanthi Dobby is one of the leading artists working in Australia addressing socio-technical imaginaries. And in this book, we really talk about AI as a material and a cultural imaginary as much as a technological tool. And so it's really a pleasure to have Xanthi in the book and to have them here this evening. Publishing timelines are incredibly long. And I think we started talking to Xanthi maybe like 2-3 years ago, and they've written an excellent chapter, which is work from their PhD, which was written quite a long time ago. So Xanthi said to us, can I present something new? And apparently the title for the performance is The Future Is Now, but Where Are the Sex Robots? Is that correct? And so we said, yes, of course. Of course you can do that for us tonight. So without further ado.
In 1999, I was 7 years old. Y2K was in full swing. When the clocks ticked over to the new millennium, the world would stop. The machines would fail us, and we'd be trapped in some kind of timeless void. I was 7, so my understanding of the situation was relatively slim. But 2000 was ultimate future, and that New Year's tipping point was total temporal collision. The future promised was flying cars and sex robots. That's what Austin Powers, Blade Runner, Back to the Future had promised me, but over 20 years have now gone by, and where the fuck are the sex robots? Like, sure, They exist, but they're all niche and weird and unsophisticated, mum's basement style projects, creepy little men with creepy little dolls. I want full fantasy, customizable AI intimacy. I want soft silicon skin, uncanny valley, Ron Muick real fuck robot embrace. I want to fall in love. I want bicentennial they/them. Deep cybernetic romance arc spanning decades, centuries, fighting for their rights. I want to be front line. I want robot Stonewall. I want to pick up my robot girlfriend in my flying convertible, self-driving, of course. I don't like to drive. I'm a gay person. Even in this fantasy space, for some things, we simply cannot, nay, will not, suspend disbelief. I want to make out in the back seat, self-lubricating, plush tongue with a variety of attachments and extensions, little tentacle sucker things and shit like that. Soaring over the city, Danny and Sandy at the end of Greece, inexplicably taking to the clouds. Did they die? Regardless, heaven is a place on earth for me and my sex robot polycule. We've got cyborgs and monsters and humans, and nobody really gives a fuck about any of that. This is cyber feminist utopia. We are the future cunt, positive anti-reason, here to take down Big Daddy mainframe. We're just equals, you know? And the robots, they want to be here. Sure, there's power play, it's hot. But this is a full consensual robot orgy, yes and. Nobody's shutting anything down. We're all here for one thing, and that is getting turned on. And there's no stigma, everyone's just cool with it, everyone's doing it. Even your grandma got a new boy toy 10 years after your granddad died, and she's finally starting to live again. Not that she was in deep mourning or anything, it's just like a generational thing, but she's rewiring, going on flying bus tours and seeing the world like she always wanted to. And she is getting fucked so well. Gently and with care. This boy toy knows how to handle a woman of her years. Sex was never about pleasure for her, and now she's coming hard on artisanal robot cock every goddamn night, and we are just so happy for them both. Sex robots aren't just an industry, they're part of the very fabric of our newfound society. We've got sexy cyborgs in parliament, they're self-coding, no human intervention required. And we've all leaned in so hard to biotechnology at this point that we are them anyway, and there's this big, sweeping sense of unity. We're finally putting all this money towards healing the planet. Got to see to that climate crisis if we want to keep reveling in this gorgeous moment. Fortunately, the robots are strong and smart and fast, and damn do they look good erecting all of those solar panels and windmills. They're well paid, of course. This is expert labor, and we respect that, and they run all of the banks anyway. All the mines have been shut down, even the ones for precious metals that we need for batteries and iPhones and stuff. The sex robots just found a new solution, one way outside the bounds of human thought capacity. We just never would have gotten here without them. In a way, the sex robots have taken over, I suppose, but because the class system has been obliterated, we're all pretty content with our sex robot overlords. And we're working so hard on gender and sexuality and race now that we finally have the mental and emotional capacity to spend some time with these very human issues. The sex robots just don't have problems like that. Modern machinery, after all, is an irreverent upstart god, mocking the Father's ubiquity and spirituality. And we're not much for religion anymore. Everybody has their own little faith systems, and they're free to worship whoever and however they want between the town-wide sex parties. Not compulsory, of course, but attendance is encouraged because, for the sake of community, and we care about community. All the kids are raised by a collection of nurturing robots with hybrid on and offline classes to make sure that they have time to mix with both humans and robots and learn about our fucked up histories and all the dumb stuff that we used to do to each other, the colonialism and the war and the hate crimes, because we're not interested in erasure, we're taking accountability, and it's written into the curriculum from day one. And every day we go to these big Grecian-style parliament meetings and everybody gets their say and there's new philosophies and the arts gets so much funding. Now that the planet is back on track and we've got universal basic income, we all sleep so much better, 8 hours minimum. And the news cycle is mostly positive. There are still people, so there are still petty crimes and minor atrocities, but prisons have been abolished and we've got robot-crafted rehabilitation programs where everybody gets a job at the end if they want one on working on the space expansion project. We've almost got breathable air on Mars, and we finally made first contacts with the society of very attractive aliens on the other side of the universe, and they have sex robots too, which is what's made this whole thing possible. And the government is being super transparent about the whole thing. We have an alien social media platform to make alien and alien sex robot friends and learn about their culture, which is just so interesting and honestly not that different from our own. There are dating apps too, but they feel somehow less problematic. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's less like window shopping. There's space for real connection, you know, but it's also chill to just be like, I want to fuck an alien. Everybody wants to, and it's just such a relief that we can all be honest about that. And we've started drafting up plans for an interstellar exchange program, but until then, we've got immersive virtual experiences that allow us to go on cute dates and attend alien concerts and art shows. It's pretty wild how to them, we are the aliens. And you would think that there would be a language barrier, but no. The sex robots sorted that pretty quickly, a kind of sophisticated dubbing technology. It's a bit clunky, everybody sounds like Cate Blanchett. She lent her voice for the occasion after we all voted her in as the most desirable and comforting vocal presence, and we are not complaining. Soon we'll be able to program any voice that we like, but I personally love Cate, so I will probably just stick with her. It's a wonderful life, and we're all very pleased with ourselves and the sex robots and everything that we've managed to achieve together. So the future is now, but where the fuck are the sex robots? Thank you.